Mhm.
Well, that's good to know at this stage of the game. Carrie, were you finished? 'Cause we
I was,
lost-
thank you.
Got it. I just need to explore a little bit. I think, you know, another issue that we need to be thinking about is this funding is going to be available for facilities, but there really was no addressing of workforce capacity in any broad sense at the same time this session. And as a result, we're dealing with one piece of the puzzle, and we have others that we really need to put on our high priority list. When I was thinking about the impact of this legislative session, that's an issue that just is in neon lights in my brain all the time. We've got to have the people in these places to be able to deliver the programs, and that needs to be addressed pretty quickly. Any other comments or questions for Lane? Nope, hearing none. Lane, anything else you wish to add? Or?
Oh, the one thing that I did want to add is that if for I know that you had asked Yuko for the board members to reach out. So if I could be the and one
Yeah.
with that, so that I can also see the you know, each of the different elements of the system in you know, in the natural environment that they exist, so that I can understand too how to better stitch or, you know, more effectively stitch a lot of these things together, as well as the different state agencies, because I know that the requirements, you know, cut across a lot of subject matter areas. So to the extent that's possible.
I see no reason why we can't ask people to reach out to the both of you for that purpose. That you can see things in operation as well and get a sense of what kind of space is needed, what kind of people occupy them, and who tends to be the clientele in those communities. That would probably be quite helpful. So I would like to ask that both Lane and ELB report back to us on what happens with the SFA and where that seems to be heading once you've had the opportunity to meet with the new director, whom I have also heard is seeking to have conversations with ELB about moving this forward, which is a healthy sign in the final analysis. But if the two of you would take that on as your to-do list for the, come back to us as soon as you've had an opportunity to connect with SFA, so we can begin to look forward to how we can be supportive of the effort. I certainly would probably see it as part of the conversation in the strategic implementation subcommittee group that Lane, we would invite you to be a part of for sure. All right. Any other final comments for Lane before we take him off the hot seat? Well, thank you for the update and for digging into this and helping us to think about it. We're counting on your direction and recommendations as we move forward. And we know it takes some time to learn the environment that you have to deal with. We appreciate that. So thanks so much. The next item on the agenda was leadership updates, a lot of which we've talked about already, just incidentally. I wanted to mention something about the orientation and onboarding of Yuko. Thank the staff for all the work it has done over the past week and a half to provide the time to bring Yuko on board and to have an opportunity to get to know each of those members. We appreciate the effort. And Colleen, I know you spearheaded that particular effort. And now That's not going to end, obviously, that's going to continue. And we've added the board component and reaching out to the community where it's appropriate to make the connections for Yuko of the key people that she needs to be connected with. So we appreciate that. With regard to the legislative session, the SFA conversation was one that I thought was really critical for us to consider and think about where we're going to go. That needs to be high on our priority list over the next year to both determine how we take advantage of the opportunity that's there, but at the same time, how we manage that opportunity to make it a feasible and viable one to really expand the efforts that we're trying to do to implement Act 46 in particular. And to see how we can be supportive of the private sector in the process. The other items that came out of the legislature that we need to have on our radar and on our plates for next year, obviously the two pieces of legislation that came out of the legislature with regard to the concurrent resolutions. We have two tasks that we have been charged with. One is the roadmap on Act 46 and the implementation report that's required there, which is due the 30 days, I believe, or 20 days, I forgot which now, prior to the opening of the legislative session. That's upcoming legislative session. We need to figure out how we're going to address that particular report and the information that's needed. The timing was not changed despite my request to amend the concurrent resolutions to allow more time to really gather effective data that we could use. So we need to consider how do we address the request of the legislature with regard to the report and the implementation roadmap that they have requested. I am going to suggest that this be, obviously we're asking Lane to help guide us with this, but that this also be a high priority of the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee. It put that on its agenda as a key item to track and help to facilitate, since it is the most logical subcommittee we have for that effort. The other one is SR 30, which asks the Early Learning Board to evaluate and report about the board's composition charter and its charter and to develop a strategic plan. Ali, I'm going to ask you if you would put that on the agenda for the governance subcommittee. It fits really within the purview, I think, of that subcommittee, unless you have any disagreement with that. Does that make sense to you?
Yep, I'll put it on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Those two resolutions will provide a fair amount of the conversation I anticipate we'll be taking on over the next year in our board meetings and will be among our priorities. The other I think we really need to think about is workforce capacity. Clearly, this stipend bill was not successful this session. The fact that it was coupled with a pilot subsidy program may have made it more difficult to fund. We do have the support from the Castle Foundation monies, and the office has been working with the University of Hawaii to create an MOU so that the next 3 years stipend funding can be utilized. And it may be that we need to demonstrate to the legislatures how effective that stipend program is to convince them that they need to join in and provide some of that funding. But I think there's a bigger issue here too, and that's how do we get the funding for workforce capacity in its broader sense, and how do we approach that, not only in light of the RAND study that's being done, but just in general, if we're going to stand up spaces and really offer quality access that supports all children and families in Hawaii, we need to be able to plan for how we are going to provide the education of those who are going to be delivering those services. And given the fact that providers are challenged today to just fill their staffs, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think it really behooves us to take a very active role in pushing that particular agenda. So with some of my thoughts with regard to the way things have transpired and ended up, assuming the governor signs most of the bills that are sitting on his desk. I have heard an undercurrent that there may be some funds in the general fund to support the subsidy pilot, but I don't know if that's a reality yet. We'll have to wait and see if that in fact is happening. But that would also open up another opportunity. So the priorities that we as a board need to be looking at, I think, as we continue our conversations over the next year, are becoming clearer based upon the results of this particular session that has just ended. Just some of my initial thoughts. Anyone have responses or comments that you want to make? I certainly would appreciate knowing if people agree or disagree with those as emerging priorities.
I agree, Bob.
Good.
I'm sorry, just confirming, Bob, that the finance committee will address the funding questions that Carrie brought up.
Yeah, I think we can ask the finance committee to do that. We will not put that on the governance committee. I will ask them to bring it back to the governance committee to review, though, because that's the policy process that we had established originally a couple of years back. Once they have come up with a policy. So yeah, I have that on my agenda outcome. Any other comments or questions? All right, then let's move on the agenda. This is the opportunity for member updates.
Bob, I actually have a question for Matt Shim related to early intervention services.
Okay.
Matt, do you have clarification yet as to whether or not EIS received their $3 million request, three plus change request?
We believe so. It was because it was in the it was a budget request.
Right.
We have not received our budget tables, so we don't know specifically. It appears by our general fund overall summary numbers that the 3.6 was included, but I cannot tell you for sure because we've not seen the budget sheets.
Okay, thank you. So if I could ask the early learning board members to please write to the governor and request that he appropriate the 3.6 million and sign off on that via HB 1600. That would be, we would be very grateful for that.
Bob Sherilyn has an update.
Okay, Sherilyn.
Hi, I just wanted to give you an update on the Department of Education superintendent search. The Board of Education search subcommittee asked the advisory group to comment on 4 semifinalists, which they then used to recommend finalists to the Board of Education. The finalist interviews will be on May 19th, 2022. I think that's in a week. And I am putting a link. You didn't hear any of that, did you? Did you hear that? I'm sorry, it looked like I was on mute.
We heard most of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. If you want to say it again, we can listen.
Well, that's okay. All I'm saying is that I think the end statement is the Board of Education will be interviewing finalists on May 19th, and the notice is in the chat.
Okay,
Thank you.
and thank you for the link. Any other board member updates? I have 2 that have come across my computer, both from the Ethics Commission. One is to remind people that if you haven't filed with them the financial statement that needs to be made annually, that is due by the end of May. May 31st is the actual date. This is the annual disclosure that we are all required to do as board members, other than those who are already employed by the state, who do that automatically annually, is my understanding. The other is that the Ethics Commission is providing, I will send you this particular announcement in totality, but it's providing some ethics training classes. I'm not suggesting we need them, but we would benefit from checking them out, that's for sure. I will send you the information about when they're being held, but they also have them online at ethics.hawaii.gov, ethics online training. It's a 30-minute interactive training session that provides the basic information. So if you haven't had the training, it would probably not be a bad idea. Some of the challenges we have as board members, those of us who have served in the private sector, is really understanding the obligations of being on a public board. And this would be an opportunity to gain a bit of additional training to help us to better understand what our responsibilities are by virtue of serving on this particular board, the Early Learning Board. All right. Are there any other member updates? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the second opportunity for public comment. Is there any public comment to be offered? Okay, Christine?
So KCAA was one of, I think, about 160 group child care centers that was awarded a child care stabilization grant through the ARPA funding. And included with that, and it's tied to the workforce issue, were $2,500 retention awards.
Oh,
For every employee that the group child care center had on board as of December 31st. So, and that is still employed because it's a retention award. So actually tomorrow, 74 of our employees will be receiving $2,500. How awesome is that?
that is wonderful.
So thanks to DHS for getting that money out and on the streets, and we deeply appreciate it, and everybody is super happy. There were many tears of joy.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's too bad we couldn't make that a monthly process.
Well, let's
It'll
start
sure make a
with-
difference.
Be grateful for what we have. Yes,
Yeah.
it is true, but it's pretty great.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, hearing none, we'll close out this meeting. I want to review the agenda outcomes first of all, and then Carrie, ask you to share with us some thoughts as we leave this meeting. We have introduced our new director officially, and the board has been charged with setting up a meeting to help continue the orientation process, whereby Yuko will find out more about your sector and be invited to meet some of the members of the sector, and if appropriate, arrange a site visit for whatever group that you belong to. We stood up the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee, thanks to the work of Ale Ale. It now has 4 board members, a chair who has been approved, and a revised charter. So it is ready to be launched. My task is to contact Ben, who was not able to be here, and we will work to convene that particular subcommittee. Wayne provided us with 2 things we need to keep in mind as we look ahead. One is he is uncovering a lack of understanding really of the variety of early care and early learning options that we need to, that decision makers need to consider within the context of the early learning community as we do expansion, and that more education may be needed for that understanding. He also pointed out the challenge in spending down the 200 million that the SFA has and the time frame allotted, and we need to pay attention to that and how we can help to make that a reality. We have charged the Finance Committee with addressing funding efforts that the board takes on, some similar to the systems mapping efforts. How is that going to happen, and a policy to bring back to the Governance Committee to then recommend to the board. We've asked that the Executive Office and Lane report back to this board when they have connected with SFA and what the plans are moving forward about how they will work together. And based upon the two resolutions passed during this session, we have asked the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee to help shepherd the roadmap for Act 26 and the report therein. And we have asked the Governance Committee to move forward exploring the board composition, its charter, and the potential of a strategic plan to come back to the board for its decisions in preparation for responding to the resolution that we have been asked to re-examine the board composition. Those are the outcomes that I had collected during this meeting. And anyone have anything to add? All right, then Carrie, we missed you last time. All we had were my goodbye words. So what are your good words for us to think about as we leave this meeting today?
Okay, when I was looking for quotes for this meeting, I couldn't help but think about Roe being jeopardized and access to safe reproductive health for our women and our moms. And so I am quoting Hillary Clinton: "You cannot have maternal health without reproductive health. And reproductive health includes contraception and family planning and access to legal, safe abortion." I know it's weighing heavy on many people's minds, and it's critical as we think about healthy births. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, everyone. We have a lot of work to do, but it's exciting and opportunities are available. We need to take advantage of them and continue to move forward. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Remember, we are meeting in person at KCAA. There are plenty of seats here if you would like to join us. It's a very strange experience to sit in a meeting with people somewhere out there, while some of us sit here and look at empty seats. Love to see you all, and stay healthy, take care, and hopefully we can be fully in person by the fall. That's our goal. Aloha, everyone.